Pokemon TCG Pocket's next set A38, the mini set Extradimensional Crisis, will be released on the 29th of May. And this set is focused on Ultra Beasts, a subset of Pokemon from another dimension. And I don't think it's by coincidence that Buzzwole EX is on the pack art. There's a lot more to talk about for Buzzwole than I had initially thought. Welcome back to another TCG Pocket video, it's Brovinny here. If you haven't checked out the trailer yet, make sure you go check it out. In this trailer, we got a glimpse of some upcoming new cards and features, with the main one revolving around Ultra Beasts. This is just a tag to tell you which Pokemon are Ultra Beasts, so that if an effect specifically targets Ultra Beasts, then they'll only target cards with this tag. Otherwise, they don't really have any effect on the gameplay. They are still just Pokemon cards. And on the pack art representing all of the Ultra Beasts is this Pokemon here called Buzzwole. Let's see if it's any good. For 2 energy, it can do an attack that does 30 damage. Seems pretty weak. My Farfetch can do 40. It's not an EX and it only needs 1 energy. But I guess the point of Punch is so that after you use Big Beat, which is the other attack, because you can't use Big Beat again, you need to swap to Punch so that you can overall do 120 plus 30 damage over 2 turns. But even then, it seems like a fairly weak Pokemon with such low damage for a pretty high energy cost. And the fact that you can't attack next turn just drags down the average damage output. Except that this statement isn't actually true sometimes. During your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Big Beat can be nullified if you retreat the Pokemon. Here is an example of a similar effect. Flip a coin of tails. During your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. Or can it? So in my first turn, I use Time Mash. I flip a coin, I get tails, so the next turn I can't attack. This is the second turn and you can see that I can't attack. I can't use Time Mash. But if I retreat Origin Form Dialga to, say, a fossil, and it has to be a fossil because you can't retreat a second time in the same turn. What you can do with a fossil is you can discard it, bring back the same Pokemon, and then on that same turn, you actually can attack. So if you manage to fit some fossil items in your deck, you can actually use Big Beat consecutively, as long as you can cover for the energy costs. There is a second way to allow you to attack again. In this example, I use Time Mash in the first turn, I flip tails, and in the second turn, as you can see, I can't attack. What I did was I used Solgaleo Rising Row to swap out the Dialga. Of course, in this situation, I can just attack with Solgaleo, but I decided to retreat so that I can show you that Dialga can attack in that second turn. So in that retreating, it cleared the condition that it can no longer attack. But perhaps you don't need to do all of that, because to have Buzzwole to be in the same deck as Solgaleo doesn't seem to make sense. They're not of the same energies and you need to evolve to Solgaleo. Fossils might work, but the other option is to use Celesteela. Celesteela's ability is during your turn, you can switch out an active Ultra Beast with one of your benched Ultra Beasts. And using an ability doesn't count as retreat, so you can use this ability and retreat in order to bring Buzzwole back out and have it use Big Beat again. Just be careful of the order you do things, because if you use Celesteela's ability to swap Celesteela into the active slot and then retreat into Buzzwole, you're going to have a problem dealing with the 4 energy retreat cost. But what if you don't do all of that? What if you don't do all the retreating and all the trickery in making Big Beat hit again? Will Buzzwole have a space in the meta? For 120 damage, it seems alright, but it's not a big power creep by any means. Except that you can do 120 damage in 1 turn if you combine it with Lucamine. Lucamine allows you to attach 2 energies to your Buzzwole or any Ultra Beast, and of course you can put 1 energy on that turn as well, completing the 3 energy required to hit in 1 turn 120 damage straight from your hand. So I think the power creep comes... So I think there is some power creep here, considering that Lucamine can allow you to hit that much in 1 turn. You can even surprise your opponent. You can hold on to your Buzzwole until you collect Lucamine at the same time, put the Buzzwole down, put Lucamine down, have 3 energies, 120 damage. Your opponent will never see it coming. But Lucamine comes with 3 drawbacks. 1, you can only use Lucamine if your opponent has got 1 win point. So it's a rather mid to late game card. 2 is that you can only use it with Ultra Beast, which of course Buzzwole is one. And 3, it has to be energy from your discard pile, not your energy zone. So you can't use Lucamine in turn 1 because, well, your opponent probably hasn't got 1 win point yet, or you haven't actually lost any Pokemon, therefore you don't have any energies in your discard pile. Now, because I don't have Lucamine yet, because, well, the set hasn't released, I'm going to show you a close example. Volkner here attaches 2 electric energies from the discard pile to either Electivire or Luxray. It is unusable. You can't use Volkner if there's no energy discarded in the discard pile. And if you've never paid attention before, you will need to start looking at discard pile to see if you actually have discarded energies. Because if you're using Lucamine, you're going to have energies there for it to work. If you have a discarded energy, so in this case I've got 1, and I use Volkner on Electivire, it will attach that 1 energy. If I had 2 in the discard pile, it would of course have attached 2. By the way, if you happen to be using fossils, I'm not actually sure this will pick up, but if you happen to be using fossils and you put your energies on the fossil, you can discard that fossil, have the energies go along with it to the discard pile. Why would you do that? Well, maybe you haven't pulled the card that you need just yet. Maybe you're using fossil for the retreating that we were talking about with Buzzwole, and you've got some other Pokemon in the active slot right now. You're waiting to draw that Buzzwole or whatever other Ultra Beast you're waiting for. If you have 2 energies on a fossil, you can discard that fossil and then have it go along into the discard pile so that you can bring Lucamine in to recycle those energies. In this situation, the fossil is also a safety net, because if I didn't have a fossil there and someone were to knock out my Electivire while I'm waiting for the next Pokemon, then I would lose. With the fossil, at least I get 1 more turn to draw another card, hopefully what I need, put that down, then discard this fossil, and then have Lucamine recycle that energy, put down my own energy from the energy zone, and then have 3 energies ready to attack. The downside of Volkner is, of course, it doesn't work on anything but Electivire and Luxray, whereas Lucamine works on all Ultra Beasts, giving you more versatility of its use. And if you've never paid attention before, there is actually one more way to discard energy into the discard pile. The other way to put your energy into the discard pile, have a look at this. So right now there's no energy in my discard pile. What I'm going to do is I'm going to not attach my energy and just end my turn or do an attack. As it turns out, when you don't attach an energy, which almost never happens unless your opponent has some Pokemon that does damage based on how many energies you've attached, but generally speaking, it doesn't usually happen that you don't attach an energy. But when you do this, when you end your turn, have a look at my discard pile. The energy actually goes to the discard pile. It might look like it vanishes, but it doesn't just vanish. It goes to the discard pile, which is interesting, because had I attached the energy and I'm actually waiting for an Ultra Beast from my deck, say if I were to draw an Ultra Beast right this moment and then I use Lucamine, then at least I have some energy in my discard pile to use Lucamine. Of course, there's the other condition that my opponent has to have 1 win point first, which sometimes means you've already discarded some energy, but that may not be the case. If you've been using a Pokemon just to tank, maybe a Druddigon, so maybe you haven't actually attached any energies at all. Well, one way to save those energy zone energies is to put them in the discard pile, then have Lucamine recycle them back into your Pokemon, allowing you to attach 3 energies in 1 turn. 2 of them were saved from the turns prior to be recycled at that point. I don't think this is common knowledge until now, because it wasn't really a useful tactic unless you were using Volkner. But with Lucamine in the picture and potentially have Ultra Beasts show up in the meta, you might want to consider discarding your energy in the right situation. And in this way, the other advantage is you don't have to sacrifice another Pokemon in order to put those energies into the discard pile just so you can recycle them back out. You can choose not to sacrifice your active Pokemon while you're waiting for the Pokemon you're trying to draw, then have Lucamine attach those energies. Now, I don't think it would necessarily be commonly done, but I do think that if you know about this strategy, you would consider it in the right situations. Just remember that you can't use Lucamine unless your opponent has already 1 win point. So that was Buzzwole. How about other Pokemon? Let's see what else we can do with them. Nihilego does additional poison damage, but it doesn't have to be poison from Nihilego itself. You can use any Pokemon to poison, and the ability will cause all poison to do double the damage. And it doesn't even need to be in the active slot. It has 70 health and 1 retreat cost, which makes it a reasonable Pokemon to start with as well. Unfortunately, you can't do any of the poison or the attack until you've attached 2 energies. So it'll be interesting to see whether people use Nihilego as an active Pokemon to poison the opponent and then have its ability do additional poison, or whether they will combine it with other Pokemon that can do poison to utilize this ability. Guzzlord is gonna be annoying as hell. Flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, discard a random energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. It is just Team Rocket Grunt unlimited. You can use it every turn with the attack that also does 30 damage. In the meantime, building up its energy, and I know it costs a lot of energy, it costs you 4 energy to do the 120 damage attack Tyrannical Hole, but in the meantime, you're discarding your opponent's energy. Relatively speaking, you're actually gaining energy quicker. So while the damage isn't huge, and the energy cost is high, Guzzlord is going to be very interesting. Remember a situation like Misty where you keep flipping until you get tails, on average you get 1 energy. That means as an average comparison, every turn you use Grindcore on Guzzlord, your opponent loses on average 1 energy. And if you haven't seen my analysis on Team Rocket Grunt about how it operates when it's up against Superior, make sure you check it out, because it's a little bit strange. It may not be what you think it does. We already talked about Celesteela. The ability allows you 1 free retreat on an Ultra Beast, which is great for Pokemon that have like 4 retreat costs, including Celesteela itself. Also, Guzzlord has 4 retreat costs, also good for Buzzwole because it will allow you to use Big Beat a second time if you use this ability. Unfortunately, its attack is kinda strange, 3 energy to do 100 damage, but half the time it doesn't do anything because you gotta flip ahead. But with 120 HP and being a non-EX Pokemon and essentially allowed to retreat for free once per turn, Celesteela's not bad at all. It's quite tanky. Put a Rocky Helmet on it, it's essentially a tank that allows you to deal counter damage with 0 retreat cost and still provides technical support for your team in subsequent turns with its ability. Kartana is like Farfetch but for grass types with 40 damage for a single energy. Of course it can't evolve, but still a very reasonable output. Pheromosa does 20 damage to your opponent and then 20 to a bench Pokemon, which you'll want to combine with using Cyrus and then bring in your Buzzwole to finish off the opponent. Xurkitree does Confusion, 3 energy requirement and 60 damage. Sort of low output for such a high energy cost, but maybe you can use it with Lucamine. And a lot of electric Pokemon which aren't Ultra Beast discard a lot of electric energies like Raichu or Luxray, so maybe you could use them together, although Lucamine wouldn't be able to put energies on those Pokemon, it can put them on the Ultra Beast. Naganadel can do poison and only costs 1 energy to attack, but it needs to evolve. So you can use it with Nihilego to do more poison damage, but both Pokemon can't really activate that poison on the first turn. Stakataka 40 damage, but then takes 20 less. Neither of these 2 Pokemon can utilize Lucamine that well. An Ultra Beast that can really utilize Lucamine will have 3 energy costs because then it can do more damage and have more effects, which Blacephalon kind of does because it's got 3 energy requirement, does 130 damage, which is quite nice. In fact, a little bit more than Buzzwole. So you can put down Blacephalon and attack on the same turn if you have Lucamine and 2 discarded energies and your opponent has 1 win point already, but it does 70 damage to itself. It will die next turn whether your opponent kills you or you kill yourself. It's a bit of a suicidal attack, but it might work in the right situations, or maybe you want to try and heal it, although that's a lot of healing. You're gonna need to heal 50 damage from it for it to survive 1 more self-inflicted damage. And that's assuming your opponent doesn't attack you the next turn after your first attack. The Island Guardian Tapu Koko is here. It has 130 HP, has 2 attacks, one of them is 1 electric energy, the other has 3 energy cost. this looks very familiar, and it has 1 retreat cost. It looks just like Zapdos EX. It has 2 attacks, it has 130 HP and 1 retreat cost. The first attack costs 1 energy and the second attack costs 3 energies. They do have different weaknesses, but I would say that Tapu Koko EX is a power creep on Zapdos EX because Zapdos' first attack does 20 damage and has no effect, whereas Tapu Koko can generate 1 extra energy to attach to itself, allowing it to hit the next attack earlier. In fact, in the next turn, at which point it will do 90 damage, whereas Zapdos needs an extra turn relatively speaking, and on average will do 100 damage. And then there's Type Null. I'm not sure we'll see much use of this one because it will cost 2 energy to retreat and it only has 80 health. And on average, just 30 damage. Zero Aura, it attaches an electric energy to itself at the end of your first turn. I assume that means that it only works on the first turn, quite literally your first turn. If your turn is the second turn, I don't know if it'll work, but maybe it's still counted as your first turn. Regardless, if you don't pull Zero Aura in that opening hand or the first draw, you're not going to use that ability. Not much to say about Alolan Diglett. Flip a coin. If tails, this attack does nothing, so on average it does 20 damage. Shiinotic is really interesting. Every turn you can put a random Pokemon from your deck into your hand. That can be basic, can be evolution. It might help with any evolution decks. And its attack is colorless, so meaning that it can belong in any deck. It doesn't have to be a psychic or a grass deck. Although unfortunately it is a stage 1 evolution, so how many Shiinotic will you run in your deck? Will you run 2 Shiinotic and 2 Molao just to have it speed up the rate at which you get your other Pokemon cards to overdraw your deck? I think that's a big downside of Shiinotic. If it were a basic Pokemon, this would be crazy. You would have it out on your bench just to draw more cards every turn. Unfortunately, because of its evolution requirement, it might end up just pulling another Shiinotic or another Molao into your hand, which you might not need. As cute as this card is, I think it's a complete waste of time. I don't know why they released this card. Flip 3 coins, this attack does 10 damage for each head, so you can do 0. So you can do 0, 10, 20, or 30, but that range is so small and almost inconsequential, yet it's just taking up more animation time because you gotta flip the coin, and 3 times at that. I think whoever designed the attack on this card is trolling. And that's it from the trailer, but on Pokemon Zone, we did get a glimpse of something else. That's Ultra Necrozma EX. It's a basic Pokemon, you can play it straight away. It has 2 attacks. We don't know its retreat cost, we don't know everything about it yet, but it has 2 attacks. One is Photon Claw, 60 damage, any 3 energy will do. Meaning that to use that attack, you can have Ultra Necrozma in any deck. If you bring Lucamine, that's 1 turn to 60 damage. I think Buzzwole works a bit better in this case because it can do 120 for 3 energies. The other attack though is what's really interesting about Ultra Necrozma. Both players will discard 5 cards from the top of their deck. That's a real problem for players who rely on evolutions. If you happen to discard any evolution card, you could have bricked the game for them completely. But of course, this card can also affect your build. So if you're using Ultra Necrozma, don't bring evolutionary cards, just bring basic Pokemon. So with Ultra Necrozma, maybe the age of rare candy and stage 2 evolution is going to be in the past. The only problem though, to utilize this attack requires 2 different energies, psychic and metal. And right now, I can't think of a good way in order to build those energies. If you have a good idea of how to use Ultra Necrozma, do let us know in the comment section below. I thought about using Dialga EX in order for Dialga to generate metal energies for Ultra Necrozma, but to do that, your Dialga EX needs to have 2 metal energies first. And if you don't get metal energy in your energy zone, you get psychic energies instead, then you won't be able to generate that energy. On the other hand, or additionally, you could bring Giratina EX, which can generate its own psychic energy guaranteed. But how do we move that energy from Giratina EX to Ultra Necrozma EX? Well, there's 2 ways. You can use Dawn to bring the energy to your Ultra Necrozma if it's in the active slot, but you can only do 1 psychic energy at a time. Or you can use Lunala EX, which allows you to move all psychic energy from a bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon, which is in this case Ultra Necrozma. But that of course means that you're going to have to bring both Giratina and Lunala EX into an Ultra Necrozma deck and still needing to build your metal energies. But this is the main way I can think of to use Ultra Necrozma. Giratina plus Lunala and have Dawn in your deck just in case, and have your energy zone do mainly metal energies, and fingers crossed all the stars align when you play your game. All of that though just to counter evolution decks may not be worth it. If you're up against only basic decks, discarding the top 5 cards of the deck may not be as useful. Let me know what you guys think of Existential Crisis in the comment section below. Thank you for watching guys, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe.